Yeah, dear students, in the previous module we have discussed the data processing, two steps of data processing, that is editing and coding. In this module we will discuss the other two steps in data processing, that are classification and tabulation, in detail. The learning objectives of this module are meaning and importance of classification and tabulation, objectives or purposes of classification and tabulation, rules of classification, importance of class intervals, basis of classification, and types of tables and tabulation. First, we will focus on the classification, its meaning and importance. Classification, which is also known as categorization of data, is the process of grouping the raw data under different understandable or meaningful homogeneous groups for the purpose of statistical analysis as well as for convenient interpretation. Thus, the collected data are divided into certain groups and classes formed on the basis of common characteristic features possessed by them. A uniformity of attributes is the basic criterion of classification, and the grouping of data is made according to similarity. Classification becomes necessary when there is diversity in the data collected by meaningful presentation and analysis. The data may be either in the form of quantities or in terms of qualitative characters. In the case of former one, the classification would be quantitative, which will be more accurate, whereas in the case of later one, it would be qualitative, which will be done mostly based on personal judgment or opinions, and as such not so accurate. We will focus upon a few things about objectives of classification. The mainly classification is done for condensing. The major objective of the classification is to present the huge data into condensed form, so that the same may be easily grasped and comprehend. Second objective of classification is simplification. To simplify the complex data and scattered data into concise and logical, so as to make to understand and use. Third objective is of projection. To project the similarities and dissimilarities existing in the data into a clear format. The fourth objective is comparison. To facilitate comparison of one set of data and its results with another set of data. And fifthly, to facilitate analysis, that is, to organize the data in a way that it may be subjected to statistical analysis, and thereby interpretation and generalization will become useful, and thereby interpretation and generalization will becomes possible. The last objective of classification is tabulation, that is, to prepare a basis for tabulation of data for testing of hypotheses and drawing conclusions. Now, we will see some of the basis for classification. Generally, classification will be done on the basis of qualitative or quantitative, geographical base, or chronological or temporal base. First, we will move to qualitative base. In qualitative, in this case, one would classify the data according to some quality or attributes, such as sex, for example, male and female, religion, may be Hindu, Muslim and Christians, educational status like illiterates, primary school, middle school, high school, higher secondary school, graduate and diploma and postgraduate, etc. Here the data or categories will be measured in terms of nominal scale or sometimes as ordinal or rank scales, that is, values assigned to each category are greater or lesser than the succeeding or preceding categories, but the magnitude of the differences between any two consecutive values is not known or not equal. Generally, in this case, the categories would be smaller in number, possibly from 2 to 6 or so, 7 or so. Next comes the another base is quantitative base. When the data are classified by quantitative characteristics or quantifying variables is known as quantitative classification. This is of two types, that is quantifying discrete data, that is in whole numbers, like in the case of age one can categorize based on discrete like 15, 16, 17, 19, 20 and so on. The number, in the case of number of children, it may be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on. And next one is about quantifying continuous data. This is mostly like height. In case of height, it is feet and inches like 5.0, 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5 and so on. And also like weight in kilograms and grams like 60.00, 60.100, 60.200 and so on. So, in this type of classification, the data will be in terms of interval and ratio scales of measurements. In this type of classification, the number of categories or groups will be many depending upon the type of data available under investigation. The third base of classification is geographical in nature. In this type of classification, the data are collected from different places and classified or placed into different regions or locations. For example, total population of different states in India, total population in different districts within each state, total population of different cities within a state or a country, etc. Here, the comparison of data will be possible across the places or locations at a particular point of time. The fourth base for classification is chronological or temporal base. In this type of classification, the data pertaining to a particular phenomenon or a phenomena are classified or arranged by different points of time such as years, months, weeks, days, etc. Depending upon the data availability by the time periods. For example, total population of India for census periods of 1901 to 2011 or sex ratio of population in different states for the census periods of 1961 to 2011, etc. Now, we will move upon to discuss about the conditions for classification. Though classification of data looks simple, certain conditions need to be followed for the sake of an appropriate classification. They are single classificatory principle, exhaustive, mutually exclusive. First one, the single classificatory principle. Firstly, for classification of data, there should be a single classificatory principle, that is, classification of all responses related to one phenomenon or question at one place. For example, occupation or monthly income or family monthly income, etc. Though this is of necessary condition, but not sufficient for classifying all responses. The next condition for classification is exhaustive. The categories must be exhaustive and sufficient for classifying all responses obtained for a particular question or phenomenon. For example, if responses are obtained on marital status, one should provide classification to include all the responses on different marital status types like single, married, widowed, separated, divorced, etc. Likewise, in the case of level of education, the categories may be illiterate, illiterate but not attended formal school, primary school, middle school, high school, higher secondary school, diploma, undergraduate and degree, professional degree, postgraduate degree and MPhil, PhD, etc. The next condition of classification is mutually exclusiveness. The different categories related to a phenomena or piece of information must be distinct, separate and hence mutually exclusive. Thus, each category should be independent and possesses information about only one type of information and should not be overlapping. For example, in the case of religion, all those who belong to Islam should be classified exclusively as Muslims rather than Sheikhs and Sayyids, or all those who belong to Christianity should be classified as Christians rather than Catholics and Protestants, unless such classification is needed separately for analysis purposes. Now, we will move to the importance of class intervals in classification. While classifying the large size quantitative data, that is discrete or continuous, one of the major tasks of the researchers should take into consideration is about the class intervals. The researchers have to take a decision not only about the number of classes or categories of a particular phenomena, but also think and fix about the magnitude or size of the classes as well as class limits. Some of the usual procedures followed in these regard are discussed here. Firstly, the number of classes. Though there is no specific answer with regard to the number of classes to be formed for a particular piece of information or variable, the decision on this firstly depends upon the size of the data and the skill and experience of the researcher. The major objective behind this should be to display the data in such a way so as to make it meaningful for the analysis by fulfilling the objectives and the hypothesis of the topic concerned. Generally, we may have 5 to 10 classes. However, this number depends mostly upon the size or magnitude of each class. Initially, one can have more number of classes or categories, but after seeing the frequencies or size of each class, one may decide to reduce the classes by combining into a few classes without disturbing the significance of the information provided in the particular classification. Hence, the number of classes mostly vary across different topics and settings concerned. The second important aspect behind classes is the class interval. As far as possible, the class intervals should be of equal magnitude. However, in some cases it is difficult to adhere to the same. Further, in social science research, sometimes unequal magnitudes may result in better classification. Generally, multiples of 2, 5 or 10 are the most preferred ones in determining the class magnitude. However, the researcher's objective judgment plays an important role in this connection. Besides, the frequency or size of the cases falls in each class. For example, in a study, age of the woman in reproductive span may be classified into 15 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, 35 to 39, 40 to 44 and 45 to 49. That is, 5 years is the class interval. However, some may categorize the same into 15 to 24, 25 to 34 and 35 and above, and some others may classify the same into 15 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, etc. In some research studies, it is warranted to keep one or more classes with few items that may fall under very high or very low values, which may be known as open-ended intervals. In the above examples, it may be 19 or less, 20 to 24, 35 to 44 and 45 and above. Though such intervals are not desirable, it cannot be avoided, maybe due to the frequency of each of these categories. The next aspect related to classes is class limits or type of classes. While classifying, the researchers have to set clear-cut class limits for each class or category. Such class limits generally may be located at multiples of 2, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 and so on. Further, these class limits will be either exclusive type or inclusive type. In exclusive type of class intervals, the items whose values are equal to the upper limit of a class interval are grouped into the next higher class. For example, see the classification like 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50 and so on, in which case the class intervals should be read as 10 and under 20, 20 and under 30, etc. Thus, in this type of class interval, the upper limit of a class interval is excluded and items will be the upper limit that not less than the lower limit are put in the given class interval. In the case of inclusive type of class intervals, the items whose values are equal to the upper limit of a class interval are included in the concerned class. For example, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, 41 to 50 and so on. In such case, the class interval of 11 to 20 should be read as 11 and under 21, which really means 20.99. Though all these rules and guidelines are on paper, most of the social science researchers are not following the same in stricter sense, as most of the data on the one side qualitative in nature and on the other side lack of experience of the researchers in scientific approach. Now, after discussing the classification, the next important dimension of data processing is tabulation. We will understand first the meaning and importance. Tabulation is another major part and last step to be followed in the data processing. In simple words, tabulation is the process of summarizing large raw data and displaying it compact form for further statistical analysis. In the process of tabulation, the researchers arrange the data not only in concise form but also in a logical manner, so as to understand by those who go through the tables. Tabulation also can be said as the systematic arrangement of data in columns and rows and displaying the same in compact form for further analysis. Some of the major objectives or purposes of tabulation are condensation, that is, to present the data into a concise form. It also conserves the space and reduces explanatory and descriptive statement to a minimum. The second objective is simplification, that is, to present the mass data in a simple and easy to understandable form. Thirdly, for comparison, to facilitate comparison of one set of data with another set of data. Next one is identification, that is, to give distinct identity of data highlighting its name, similarities and the dissimilarities existing in the data. And lastly, the analysis, that is, as noted in the case of classification, the tabulation also form the basis for analysis. Having understood the objectives of the tabulation, now we will move upon the rules and guidelines for tabulation. There are certain basic guidelines, like first one is title. Each table should have a title which should be clear, concise and adequate to give the precise idea of the content or subject matter presented in the table. Secondly, table number should be provided. Each of the table should be given a distinct table number so as to facilitate easy recognition and reference. Thirdly, size of the table. The size of the table should be neither too long nor too small. It should be adequate to accommodate the data set required for analysis. The next guideline of tabulation is caption and stubs. Column headings like captions and row headings or stubs should be short but complete to indicate the nature of data. The next guidelines of tabulation is ruling and spacing. Ruling and spacing should be appropriate for ensuring proper arrangement of data and making it more attractive. Internal division of table may be shown in thin lines, the divisions between the classes by thick lines, and double lines may be shown for totals. Another guideline of tabulation is body of the table. In the body of the table, information should be given in a systematic manner so that comparative information is kept side by side, totals are given at the end and miscellaneous information is given in the last column and last row. Unit of measurement is another guideline to be followed for tabulation, that is, the unit of measurement should be indicated under each heading and subheading depending upon the requirement. The next guideline is approximation. Data may be approximated to fit in the space provided to facilitate comparison as well as analysis. And the source also has to be given for the tabulation, that is the source of data, particularly in the case of secondary data, should be clearly given at the bottom of the table. And finally, the footnotes and headnotes also are important as far as tabulation is concerned. For example, footnotes and headnotes are the minimum explanatory notes about the data provided in the table. These should be properly given at appropriate places with a reference of the same in the main body. Having learned about the guidelines of the tabulation, we will move upon to types of tables. Tables may be differ depending upon the type of analysis and number of variables of pieces of information to be presented and data to be presented. Simple tables, for example, a simple table contains information pertaining to one or more pieces of information or questions or variables. These are mostly done based on one-way classification, keeping in view of single characteristic. Examples are information about the total population of the world by major regions like more developed regions, less developed regions and least developed regions, as well as continent wise. Likewise, population by gender wise across states of India, etc. The next type of tables are complex tables. This type of tables show the division of data into two or more categories or give information about two or more interrelated questions, mostly dealing with one or more independent and one dependent variable. If a table deals with two characteristics of pieces of information at a time, normally based on interrelated variables or information, it can be said as two-way tables, which is based on two-way classification. Example, total population of states by age and gender. Likewise, age and marital status. Another example is gender and educational attainment, wherein two variables are involved or two pieces of information is involved. However, if these tables are dealing with three-way, giving information about three interrelated characteristics, or four-way or higher order, they will be known as multiple tables, for which multi-way classification is followed, and thereby they are also known as complex tables. Examples for three-way tables are population of any state by age, gender and place of residence, age, gender and marital status, age, gender and educational attainment, etc. Now, we will move upon to the types of tabulation. Tabulation may be done by hand or by making use of electronic devices, that is computers. The choice is mostly depend upon the size of the data, type of study and resources available, that is money and computers, etc. A brief description of these two types of tabulation are provided in the following lines. Hand tabulation is the first one. This will be done manually and usually preferred in the case of small size data, namely in terms of small number of questionnaires or schedules, as well as in terms of less number of questions or information collected through such instruments. This is usually done using the direct tally or the card sort and count methods. However, the second one is not that popular in the recent past, that is card sort and count. For this purpose, the codes or categories of classification will be simple and within the manageable range, say about 2 to 3, at the most less than 5 for each piece of information. In such case, it is easy or feasible to tally directly from the questionnaire or schedules, mostly in the case of pre-coded data or at times some form of rough coding, but not necessarily numbers. The codes are written on a sheet of paper called tally sheet, and for each response a stroke is marked against the code in which it falls, like straight lines of 1, 2 like that. Usually after each 4 strokes against a particular code, the fifth response is indicated by drawing a diagonal of or horizontal line through the strokes. This will give indication that 5 codes are there in that group. These groups of 5 are easy to count and the data are sorted against each code conveniently. The next type of data tabulation is electronic tabulation. This is popularly known as tabulation through computers. In recent years, especially after the invention of personal computers, that is PCs and laptops, and simultaneously with the development of the different types of software by database the software for database management and analysis of data, simple to complex tabulation of both small or large size data has become much easier and sophisticated. Even the complex tables with statistical analysis are being prepared with no time with the help of the computers. More details about type of tables with examples are provided in the next module. In sum, in this module, a detailed discussion is made to understand about the basics of classification and tabulation, including their importance, types and procedures to be followed for the same. Hope by having learned about these, you may be able to apply the same in a scientific manner to the raw data likely to be collected for your research in population studies. Thank you.